little YouTube. High Radical wanted to come on and just do a brief little thing on something between some comments I've read recently and article I've also read recently and some other thoughts. I just wanted to get these out here. RD1999, that stuff I'm working on for the well, connected with the homosexual issue and blacks and the priesthood thing. I'm still working on that, just so you know. And some of the comments I was with RD1999's comments brought to my mind something I read recently that really kind of struck me. It's in the Wall Street Journal. It's actually, I recycle newspapers, not in the sense of sending them to some place to be shredded up and put into products that say such and such percent post-consumer product. Rather, I just read old newspapers. So, well, old. This was from February of this year, February 8th. And so, approaching Valentine's Day, they had an article on love. And it really kind of reached out and grabbed my attention because the title of it here, it's in the Weekend Journal. The title is Keeping Love Alive. And I thought, hey, even though, I'm not married right now, I'm trying to work on that. It's had some interesting things, like here's the heading. It says, neuroscientists are probing why some married couples can maintain the spark for years. And I thought, the title's Keeping Love Alive, maybe it'll tell me how that is. It's kind of a deceptive title. But it's a fascinating article, and if anybody can get a hold of it, I suggest reading it all, because I'm not going to be able to, well, I could read it all, but I'm not going to. I'm going to read some excerpts, but it starts off describing this lady and how she kisses her husband a lot and everything. So Mrs. Tucker is living happily ever after, and scientists are curious why. She belongs to a small class of men and women, and later on in the article it points out just how small this class is. Class of men and women who say they live in the thrall of early love despite years of marriage, busy jobs, and other daily demands that normally chip away at passion. Now this brought to my mind I took a psychology of love class while I was going to college. And in the psychology of love class we discussed two different kinds of love. So just to give you background of where I'm coming from, my limited knowledge on the psychology side of it, they talked about how there was a period within relationships, and it generally lasted, in serious relationships for about 2 years. It could be shorter, longer, but usually about 2 years was when it started to drop off. But they called this limerence, was the jargon. And after the limerence started to kind of go down, they said that a more steady love would come up, and so at some point it would kind of diverge, and so limerence would largely drop off, and then your more firm kind of glue friendship and everything, if you survive the tough parts. So they were just describing forms of attachment. They had limerence, which was this initial, what we always associate with romantic love, and then there was the deeper, I can't remember if they had a name for the deeper stuff, but I'd have to pull that on my books again, which I probably shouldn't. But anyway, so I had that kind of a background that it was a fascinating class. If you ever get a chance to learn today's view of love by psychologists, it's a fascinating subject. I think it's a pretty important subject too. Anyway, so it's talking about this very small minority who claim to hold on to this limerence, or this romantic love, the passion, going throughout the years. And so we get through here to the back portion of this, and it talks about this. They go to do an fMRI scan, so it's the kind of the new, I think I've described it in one of my other videos, but it's where they image the brain and different areas of the brain, they can tell like how much activity is going on in different areas. They can't get super, but spatial orientation of the activity in the brain for given things can be figured out, and that way they've been able to narrow down some things. Anyway, going on there, it says about 15 years ago, Arthur Aron, a social psychologist at Stony Brook University, became curious about couples outside the norm. His own work turned up the usual patterns of declining passion, but he was drawn to what statisticians call outliers, so just aberrations in the normal patterns, points way off the curve. These dots represented people who claimed they'd been madly in love for years. This is, it's quoting now this Arthur Aron. He says, "I didn't know what to make of that. Was it random error? Were they self-deceiving? Were they deceiving others? Because it's not supposed to happen." And so let's hear through here, and it talks about how they take this fMRI scan, and they took a whole bunch of volunteers, mostly college students, and they did an fMRI scan of their brain, and they were able to distinguish a section of the brain associated, when they would show them images, I believe, of their lovers. When they looked at photos of their lovers, there was certain sections of the brain that would light up, and they were able to, through these fMRI scans and other stuff, discern what parts of the brain, what activity, spatial orientation of activity in the brain represented this romantic love and passion and all that. So they do that, and then they take these couples that claim to have this passion ongoing, and they did an fMRI scan on their brain. And so what ended up happening is it went completely against their expectations, like this Dr. Arthur's. The work of Dr. Aron and his colleagues reflects growing collaboration between the social and neurosciences. Days after Mrs. Tucker's brain scan, Dr. Brown, a neuroscientist, sat in her book-lined office looking at the results. "Wow, just wow," she recalls thinking. Mrs. Tucker's brain reacted to her husband's photo with a frenzy of activity in the ventral tegmental area. "I was shocked," Dr. Brown says. The brain scan confirmed what Mrs. Tucker said all along, but when she learned the result, she too was a bit surprised. "It's not something I expected after 11 years," she said, "but having it, it's like a gift." The scan also showed a strong reaction in Mrs. Tucker's ventral pallidum, an area suspect from bull studies to have the links with long-term bonds. Mrs. Tucker apparently enjoyed old love and new. So I thought it was amazing that you would have something that somebody would claim, and all of the scientific community, for the most part, would see this as just aberrations and patterns, and this something is screwy here because this isn't matching up with our numbers or our theories or anything. And so just, even though they went into the test to see what it was, they weren't expecting really at all to get what they got. It was confirmation that these people were telling the truth about the way they felt. And I just think that's fascinating on one hand, and on the other, it's kind of you can see how anybody, any human that had connections with people, any long-term connections especially, if you hadn't felt passion continue on, you would want to feel, to some degree, I would think, that, well, I'm just normal, because most people don't. Well, it would be true that most people don't, but you'd even like to think that you're excused, because even these exceptional cases are just, they're not real. They're not actually possible. It's just some delusion. These people are just delusional. And I see that a lot in interactions on the topic of theism, and people certainly